Alright, hi there folks. So recently there has been a lot of posts about balance in Dungeons and Dragons, and while they may not all be directly called balance issues, that is essentially what they boil down to. And this has been both on Reddit, Dungeons and Dragons Reddit, but also in some of the Facebook groups that I am currently active in. Some of them related to dungeon mastering or D&D in general. So I should preface this by saying that I'll be talking mostly to the DMs in this video, but anyone is of course welcome to ask questions about anything D&D related in the comments, or you can give me a private message. Of course, if you have any input on the video, you're also welcome to offer them in the comments, and I'll probably answer because I can't help myself. Yeah, so for this video I figured we would have a little bit of fun talking about game balance, including everything from power gamers to rolling stats versus stat arrays and point buy and other methods, as well as other things that influence your balance in your D&D games. First off, balance in a game such as D&D is actually very easy to upset. However, it is also easy to bring back into balance here. So the DM has a lot of buttons that we can sort of push or turn up or turn down to create more balance, and we often have to use these, and some people don't even realize that they're doing it, and some people do it very deliberately. I should mention, for players it is very easy to fall prey to some kind of perception bias, where you see the big barbarian, he rolls out and he does twice your damage in one round, and he doesn't seem to be as squishy as you are. However, D&D is not just about combat, so balance. I will be talking about not just combat balance, although I realize this is a sensitive issue for many players, especially. A lot of players, and especially power gamers, really want to be the strongest member of the group. Yeah, this barbarian, if he does this much damage, he probably put a lot of his power into dex or strength to be efficient in combat. But if you ask him to negotiate a peace treaty or solve a puzzle, he might be the worst party member, and that is one of the, he has weak areas too, I think you'll find, unless of course you let him roll stats and he just rolled incredible, but we'll return to that. You'll probably also see the barbarians or the fighters more often than not. They become subject to spells like Hold Person or Crown of Madness, and you start seeing the barbarians sweat a lot during such challenges. Now, let's start from the beginning. And as I mentioned, I am part of a couple of Facebook groups, both for DMs and for Dungeons & Dragons fans in general. And recently in one of the groups we had a discussion about stats. Do you let your players roll them, or do you use stat arrays, or what method do you use? And it was a really interesting conversation, and there was a lot of different ways to go about it. I think the general consensus boils down to something like this. Rolling stats is really fucking fun. Rolling 4d6 and dropping the lowest number seems to be the most common way to roll stats. There are some additional ways to do it, a little bit more complex ways that are a little bit more forgiving, and actually try to alleviate some of these balance issues that will occur when you roll stats. What we came up with was, well, it basically has some of the same thrill as gambling does, right? If you roll really well during this session 0 or the first session, whatever, whenever you choose to roll stats, you just know your character is going to be awesome for the entire campaign. However, there will be quite large or significant differences between characters this way, and even with some alleviating rules such as re-rolling if your stats are overall too low, or some people re-roll all the ones. There is still a significant difference, and that means that already before the first combat or the first session even, the characters all of a sudden don't start on equal footing. And that is the first balance issue that many people encounter. Many of my fellow DMs explained how yeah, if someone rolls really low, they will let them re-roll everything, and yeah, although I see this as it helps the issue a little bit, it also creates another side effect that I personally dislike, but we'll return to that. So first off, a little math here. With the standard array, you get some stats. I don't recall them. This thing is like a 15, 14, a 13, a 12, a 10, and an 8. Anyways, the average of these of the stat array is 12, so you get a +1 modifier in all of your stats. That's the average. Of course, that's not how it really works, but that's actually good for the players to have this kind of disparity. We'll return to that. If you roll, I had to do some digging here because the math is actually pretty complicated. However, I found some reliable sources, and I will probably put them in the description, or if I forget, you can ask for them. I have them ready. Yeah. If you roll 4d6 and you drop the lowest, you get an average of 12.24, roughly, something like that. And you also get another effect. You get the effect that when you're rolling, there's a 10% chance when one person rolls 6 times that he will get an 18. And if you look at like if you ask any power gamer or any experienced player, they love it. They love having an 18 from the beginning. Some classes can do incredibly well with just that one 18. Yeah. And additionally, when you add those lifesaver rules, where like if you roll a 1, you reroll that, or if you roll too low, you reroll again. This of course, this pumps up the average significantly as well. This means that your players, if you roll, they will actually start out a little bit stronger than if you let them use the stat array or the point buy. You can also see when you use the point buy method, an 18 is really expensive because it's extremely good, and the developers knew that it had to come at a high cost. Yeah, and like lastly, this is the side effect that I mentioned earlier. Like when you roll and you sit with an 18, there's actually not that much progression left. In 5e, the stats cap at 20. There are very few circumstances that can make you go above this this cap, but most players doesn't really get to experience those, so we'll leave them out of this. When you start with an 18, you end up in a situation where at level 7, your gracious dungeon master, will hand you a gauntlet of ogre strength, which will automatically make your strength into a 19, no matter what it was before you put on the gauntlet. And at level 7, I will have a player looking at me like, why are you handing me this trash? I have absolutely no use for this. And I'll be sitting there all puzzled, like, but you're a barbarian, you don't use strength? Do you use stacks instead? And he'll be like, no, I use strength. Just by now, I already have a 20, so I can't really use this gauntlet for anything. But you can ask the ranger if he ever goes into melee or something. Yeah, but I guess this comes down to personal preference. So I mean that's just me. And I personally fucking love progression. So I usually start out my players at level 1. I give them the stat array, and I will give them as few items as I can do while being like before they start rioting against me, pretty much. Alright, so let's recap. Rolling is very fun, but ultimately it does create imbalance. Stat arrays are more balanced, but the result is overall lower. Like the power level of your group will be lower if they all use the stat array instead of rolling. And while I think that's good because it allows progression, there is also a counter argument where some DMs feel like the players should be heroic, so they're supposed to be stronger. Yeah. Lastly, point buy is actually probably my favorite option when it comes to at least balance. However, the biggest drawback is that it can be kinda complex. Your players will find themselves at a disadvantage. Simply because they won't know exactly what their class will need compared to an experienced player. So this is where I actually just prefer most of the times to use stat array unless I know the entire party is experienced players. Point buy is also like the reason I think it's more balanced is because not all classes have the same needs. However, point buy allows you to tailor your stats a little bit better than the standard array. If your class really needs that 18, alright, you can get it, but at a significant cost. Like it will be a huge drawback on other fields. Let's take a fighter for example. If you have a high dex score, you can hit things. You can use it to do more damage. You will have a high armor class, so you can take a couple of hits at least. In many situations, you could also you'll be asked to use, oh, do you want to use acrobatics or athletics? And you can just choose, oh, I'll use acrobatics because I suck. I have no strength. Yeah, and on the other hand, you have, I think generally the hybrid classes are those who have the greatest need for several stats, like bards, clerics, druids, so on. They benefit from having 2 or even 3 stats, like high stats, because not only do they need to have enough spells, they need to have powerful spells, and when they run out of spells, it's not uncommon that you see a cleric go into melee and hit a little bit with his longsword or mace or whatever. Perhaps he's even trying to take some of the attention away from some of the more vulnerable party members, serving this kind of protector role. And this is where he will need something. He will need some armor class, and it's unlikely that he starts out with some kind of like a full plate or whatever. If he does, alright, then he won't need dexterity at all, but he will need strength if he wants to hit with his sword. He will need constitution if he wants to take a punch, and he will need wisdom for his spells. Alright, so the next topic I'd like to look at is someone made a Reddit post where they posted an article in which the author posed a few different methods of becoming a more effective role player. And the author gave 7 factors, and one of them was try to calm down on being the power gamer. You don't have to min-max this hard, and so on and so on. While I disagree with that point, it actually spawned a sub-conversation on Reddit about how do you make balance in a game where one player is simply better at using his or her character. When you first start out in the game, it's like you see your friends and they do amazing stuff. They do so much more damage than you, and you're wondering like, alright, I have to figure this out. So the next logical step is to become a power gamer. You need to figure out, how do I do as much damage as possible. And I am sorry if I'm offending anyone with the power gamer term. There are two sides to this. One side says that if you're simply better at using your character, you should be rewarded for that, even if it means that you kill the big bad evil guy in the first round while your party gets to do nothing. The other half pretty much says that, well, you need to include everyone, even the new players should feel important, otherwise they won't have fun. And I think this is a very good topic to elaborate on. When you want to include new players, despite their lack of combat skills and strategic skills and their experience with the combat system here, there are so many ways to go about it, and this all relates back to balance, I promise. First, when they create their character, help them understand the character and the class. It can be a good idea to let the inexperienced player create a simple character. Stuff like the huge wizard spell list I find is often too much for a new player to handle. Unless you know they're like this kind of person who just gets into it and really reads and looks up on forums and asks around everywhere before they show up to the first session. Don't let them play a wizard. All right. If they really want to play a caster, perhaps give them something a little bit less reliant on spells. A warlock is a simple caster. They have usually like 2 spells or something they can cast. Their spell list is shorter, and they do have some stuff so they can go into melee. They are not as squishy as wizards. Another issue with having a new player pick an advanced class is also, let's take the wizard's example again here. They will spend so much time looking at the spell list, they won't make the efficient choice, and all of this time that they're spending on deciding each turn, it won't be fun for the rest of the party, I promise you that. Secondly, as a DM, you should create encounters with varied layouts, and it makes, like, first of all, it makes combat so much more fun. Like, have a cliff where the enemy archers are shooting down from. This will mean that some of your players will have to like dedicate themselves to taking out these guys. Like, either the fighter is going to run over with his greatsword, he's going to climb up this cliff, and then he's going to take care of them, or maybe you have a ranger who could be assigned to do that while the ranger goes over and kills some of the melee guys at the end of the stairs or something. Another thing here, have some cover. A stack of barrels is perfect for this. The enemy and the players can use this as cover. Perhaps there's something flammable inside the barrels, or the players can push over the stack to remove the cover or even squish smaller enemies. This also rewards creative thinking on the player's behalf, rather than having them walk up and stab an enemy repeatedly each round until that monster or whatever dies. This also means that even if one of the players is weaker in combat terms, he gets a chance to do something meaningful by changing the environment of the combat, and that can be really fun. There are also buttons that we can press as DMs, and it is important for us to use them actually often, so that we get a more dynamic change in the group, if you will. Total disclaimer here, I know myself personally, I don't always follow all of my own advice here. Like, it's simply impossible to remember all the tips and tricks for being a good DM, but this is one of, like, balance is one of the things that you can really think about when you're not in the session or whatever, and you can try to like change it when you're not stressed, so you can really think about it. If you have been neglecting some of this, like, don't worry, everyone does it. But step 1, look at your group of characters. What are your player's strengths and weaknesses? Is the fighter always doing better than everyone else in combat? Do you still have ways to challenge him? Will his power automatically decrease maybe by itself over time when the wizard gets more spells or something? Well, these are some good questions to consider as a DM. If the fighter is straight out better and you only have one way left to challenge him, and you always give him the same challenge, you only make whole person spells against him, he will hate it, and you will probably hate it. If it will solve itself over time, alright, maybe let him be very strong for a few sessions. That's okay. People can shine at different moments in the campaign. Currently, in one of my in my campaign, we have a druid, and she's the Circle of the Moon, I believe, where she gets to transform into a bit more powerful beasts than normal druids do. And she is incredibly strong at low level. Not only is she by far the tankiest person on the team, she does very consistent damage, and she can also heal. She can cast spells as well. But it will actually, as far as I can tell, relieve itself. Come level 7 or something, most other people will be as strong as her, and she won't actually move that much. At least that's the way I understand it. If anyone knows anything about Circle of the Moon druids, please feel free to correct me. If she grows in power this way, maybe I will have to homebrew up some rules, because she is really strong right now, at least in combat. Anyways, if we go back and take the fighter example, or the barbarian, like if the fighter is really strong and he's just cleaving through everything, and it's because you gave him this magical weapon, maybe you regret it in hindsight, but we have levers we can pull as DMs, we have buttons we can push, we can turn this thermometer thingy or everything. We can adjust balance. Maybe he finds out the weapon is cursed. Maybe it's slowly draining his soul. All of a sudden he can't sleep at night. It causes exhaustion. Maybe at some point he gets panic attacks and he gets frightened in the middle of encounters and so on. He wants to get rid of it very soon. I can guarantee you that. Maybe another way to do it would simply be like, okay, well, the fighter is the only one who's actually putting up a really good fight against my monsters. What's going on here? Well, maybe the rest of the party deserves a little bit of a buff. Maybe they, like, while you gave the fighter this magical sword, you forgot to reward the rest of your players with weapons or magical armor or rings or whatever you can think of. So maybe it's okay to buff them and well, like keep the fighter at the same power level and increase the rest of the party. And if this means all of a sudden the challenges are too easy, well, it's really easy to just make harder encounters. And I know a lot of new DMs are struggling to find out, well, this challenge rating system, how do I use it? It feels like if I put a hard encounter against them, they're just melting through it and so on. Well, there is so many like things that you can do. First of all, let's say you put them up against a Hydra, and the first attack would take half of the Hydra's HP or more. Well, first off, you increase that Hydra's HP. That's totally fine to do. Start by increasing the monster's defenses, and if you find out, well, the Hydra can't hit any of them either, well, maybe when the Hydra reaches a certain milestone, like 75% health or 50% health, it enrages and spawns 2 more heads, or it attacks faster, something, you know. This way you can kind of adjust the challenge while they're facing it. And if it's like if all of a sudden they take too much damage, maybe the enrage is only temporary. Maybe it's only for a couple of rounds. I mean, you might think that it's transparent, but the players really won't be able to call you on it. And most of the time, they should be so engaged in the combat, they shouldn't really worry about how you're designing the monsters. Now, I also saw a lot of posts about, oh, well, I have this 4-man party, there's 2-man party, there's an 8-man party. How do I balance around that? Since the Dungeon Master's guide says, oh, these are challenges based for one party of 4 characters. A challenge rating 1 is enough for 4 level 1 characters. Well, the challenge rating system is okay to some degree, but it's not set in stone, and some characters simply do better in combat than others. Some party compositions get really strong. Uh, if you have a healer, some guy who can take a punch, and some guy who deals out steady damage, well, they're gonna do better than three squishy wizards who are out of spells or whatever. Uh, and you just have to uh, come up with, like, try to challenge them incrementally, like make it harder and harder until you find a good spot. Um, Also, I think the most important thing actually in this entire balance discussion is that every player feels like they are strong at something, like they're good at something. They don't need to be equally strong at everything. That can actually be a little bit boring. When everyone, like, we had this post about 8-man party. How do you balance it? Well, let's say you walk up to these old ruins and everyone rolls a history check, and well, you just know that the person who's proficient in history is going to roll a 2, and he's not going to know anything. But Bob the Barbarian, who has a low intelligence and absolutely knows nothing about history, well, he's going to roll a natural 20, and all of a sudden he's the one who knows stuff about this. Unfortunately, he and 4 other people roll sufficiently to beat the challenge, and they all know stuff about these ruins. Well, all of a sudden, none of them are feeling very special. However, if you are tracking the kidnapped daughter of a baker, and you look at your ranger player and you know that they have the ability to track, that player is gonna be shining for a moment here. That is literally shining the spotlight on a character. And it's important to divide this spotlight both in combat encounters, skill challenges, RP conversations. It's important, like, this is actually one of the most important things in Dungeons and Dragons, so I feel like it's probably a video on its own. But when you have different abilities or skills that you are better at than others, it's not just a way for you to feel special at given moments, but it's also a way for the DM to shine a spotlight on a certain player. I know right now in my current group, the only player who knows anything about history is the cleric. So if he hasn't been doing any special thing, if the spotlight hasn't been on him in the last couple of sessions, this is a good time to put in some ancient ruins, or they find an old text, and well, he also knows a lot of languages, so this is perfect. He can, not only is he the only one who could read it, but even if someone else could read it, they probably wouldn't understand it. They wouldn't know the history about it. And if he fails, well, that's another thing that probably deserves a video on its own. I'm sure someone did it already, but you should never give your characters checks that are so important that if they fail, they won't know what to do. Like, there should be a way around it. The same goes to riddles. If you give people a riddle, the reward should be a nice item that could help them. It could be a shortcut to the destination, or something that will make it easier. But it should not be you get to the locked door. There are some runes on the door, and they form some sentences. You cannot quite make out what they're supposed to be, but here is how they look. Solve this puzzle, or you won't get further in the dungeon. That's a newbie mistake. 2-man parties. I think the specific post I found was about 2 players and the Dungeon Master. The Dungeon Master was a little bit nervous about how to balance it, because one of them was playing a cleric and one of them was going to play a monk. And well, it all comes back to shining again. Like, well, the monk might do a little bit more damage, but the cleric can heal. And they're both going to feel important. The monk is going to be really focused on, okay, who do I focus down first of these enemies? And the cleric is going to be, okay, how do I position myself so that I can help him whenever he needs it? And maybe I can go over here and distract these enemies while he takes care of the cast over there, or something like that. Now I run with a 5-player party, and I think that's perfect for me. Some people like fewer, some people like more. But with 5 people, I felt like I needed to implement a homebrew rule. So I have made it so that if you're proficient in something, then you can roll for it. Otherwise, you simply won't know. And this is because when you have 5 people, well, the odds are that one of them is going to roll a 19 or 20 or an 18 or 17. Like that's just default. So they would succeed all of my skill checks whenever I gave it to them. At least when it comes to something like knowledge, where everyone could roll. So here instead, I talked with them in session 0, and we made sure like they know what their mission is. So all of their characters have different skill sets. And again, this helps me like, oh, well, the cleric hasn't been shining for a moment, for a while. Well, I'll give him this ancient node or whatever. The last thing, wish spells and decks of many things and stuff like that. These are not things that you simply just like put into your adventure or campaign for fun. They have serious repercussions. There was this forum post about one guy, and they got to a deck of many things. The guy who wrote the post was a player, and he metagamed. He knew this deck wasn't just a regular deck. So what he did was he drew 2 cards, and he got lucky. So he got 10,000 XP, which means that in a level 2 party he was running around as a level 5, and he said that he should actually have been higher, but his DM had worked out a deal with him. So now he's level 5 in a level 2 party. That is not okay. That is not going to work out for the best for everyone. Again, with wishes, they are absolutely fine to have. You can have wish, and you can have decks of many things, but they shouldn't be some minor thing in the middle of an overarching story campaign. No, they should be when you're done. You should center the campaign. The story plot should be focused around this deck of many things. You draw something, all right. I have an idea ready for that, or we'll roll with it, or because you're gonna end up with a lich hunting your party, or the death. The Grim Reaper will spawn right in front of you, and he will straight up murder your players. That is so disruptive. It's game breaking. Anyways, I think that's all I have to talk about with balance. Super short, like you have so many things you can do about it, like balance. I think it's super important, just so that all of your players get to shine, like have the same amount of spotlight. I thought it was interesting because I saw this many posts about it. If you have any things that I left out or something I said that you like massively disagrees with, feel free to comment. I fucking love discussing this, so I mean I'm super passionate about it. I bet a ton of you are too. So yeah, maybe see you in the next video or in the comments or whatever. Have a good day. Hey.